Hello all, and welcome to this week's mini lecture. Today we will be discussing Chapter 6 in our infancy textbook, which covers sensation, perception, and motor development. So our learning objectives for this week are to describe infant sensory abilities of vision, hearing, touch, smell, and taste, as well as discuss how those initial abilities are shaped by experience, differentiate among the vestibular, proprioceptive, and kinesthetic senses, and explain how they support infants' perception and development, explain how we know that infants' senses work together to give them an integrated, coherent experience of the world, and summarize the orderly appearance of fine and gross motor skill milestones during the first 3 years, and explain how infants' experience shapes those skills. So as a brief overview, we will go over just in general theories of infant perception. We'll head into vision, hearing, touch, taste, smell, as well as other senses, intermodal and cross-modal perception, as well as motor development. Starting off with theories of infant perception, newborns are able to see, hear, feel, taste, and smell. Their ability to hear, as well as their ability to feel, are the most developed at this point in time. They have very limited vision, specifically peripheral vision. So they have a very, very narrow way of seeing. And a fun little fact I like to discuss is infants are born with the ability to see about 7 to 10-ish, maybe a little bit more inches away from them, which is believed to be due or evolved because of attachment. Because when typically a mother is breastfeeding a baby, or another parent, family member, or mother is bottle feeding, when they're holding the infant is about 10-ish inches away from the face. So it is thought that this ability to see this distance is so that the infant can see their caregiver during feedings. So moving on to theories of infant perception, they differ in the way that they explain depth perception, which is the ability to perceive the world in 3 dimensions. So empiricists believe that babies construct knowledge from experience with initially meaningless sensations. So what the infant sees when they're first born is essentially meaningless to the infant. However, over time, they construct knowledge from their experiences. The nativists believe that experience during infancy is insufficient, so the ability to perceive the world in 3 dimensions must be innate. The ecological perspective looks at the visual system and believes that it perceives meaningful information directly without intermediate steps to interpret it. So as soon as infants are born, what they perceive and sense is meaningful. And dynamic systems believes that evolutionary origins, as well as the environmental, social, cognitive, and biological factors influence development. So I do have a question for you to ponder on, which is, which newborn sensory ability do you think is the most misunderstood by new parents? And while you ponder that, you can pause the video. However, I will continue. So vision. Newborn abilities of vision, they're attracted by movement in areas of high contrast. So if you think of a human face, there's lots of contrast with it. And that's also why those like black and white cards and infant toys exist, because black and white is high contrast. Infants have the ability to control eye movement, and this improves by 11 to 14 weeks, so they can start tracking faces better instead of just staring at what is directly in front of them. Visual acuity is poor at birth, which is what we discussed earlier, but improves to adult levels by 8 months. And early screening is important for detecting and correcting visual problems. So moving on to perceiving objects, research methods are looking research methods that use perceiving methods in general. They're looking at time in forced choice preferential looking and habituation and dishabituation. So what this means is that researchers believe that the more an infant looks at something, or the longer it looks at something, or the more times that it looks at something, infants are showing preference. So it's an early ability to perceive the edges of objects, or infants have the early ability to perceive the edges of objects. And movement provides more useful information about objects than characteristics such as texture, color, or substance. So depth perception. The sensitivity to depth cues develops over the first year. I am completely blanking on the study. However, it is a study that had infants crawl, so infants that were able to crawl, so around 6-ish months, to about a year and a half, I believe. I might be misquoting this. I encourage you to look it up on your own if you have the free time. And they crawled over a solid ground, and then the ground became clear. Like, it was still solid, but there was a part where it was, what's the word? Like solid in color, like floor and stuff like that. And then there's another part that seamlessly turned into just a clear flooring. So you could see what was underneath it, yet it was still level with the other flooring. And infants without depth perception crawled right over the clear flooring and did not realize that what they saw had depth, whereas infants who are a little bit older and have developed their depth perception, they thought that this was a drop off because they didn't realize that the clear flooring was solid, and they thought that it just dropped off to what was below this clear flooring. So that is a very popular study when mentioning depth perception with infants. And I don't know if you're curious, maybe you are perceiving images on screens. Young infants are able to recognize real world entities in pictures and video images. 6 to 24-month-olds are less consistent than older viewers in scanning elements of a complex video display and may get captured by salient visual images. And infants and toddlers notice how older viewers direct attention to images on screens and may alter their scanning behavior based on those observations. So this is where modeling comes into play, and how you watch TV, or how you choose to look at video images, infants will begin to copy that. Which I do have a discussion question for this, what are the pros and cons of young children watching videos alone or with a parent? I encourage you to pause the video and ponder on that. If not, we will move on, because this mini lecture is turning into a long lecture. So hearing, locating sounds. Newborns turn in the direction of sounds so that they are able to locate sounds. The ability to locate the precise origin of the sound, however, continues to improve throughout infancy and childhood. Infants pay special attention to the human voice and seem to prefer the human voice over any other sounds. And exaggerated high-pitched voices arouse infants and attract their attention. This is where baby talk comes from. As well as low-pitched sounds are soothing and calming, which maybe you've noticed that an infant gets excited when you're talking, baby talking and things like that, and say somebody else with a lower voice comes in, and they're able to calm the infant a lot more quickly than, say, a higher pitched or excited voice is. this is believed to be why. So music and infants. Music has been used therapeutically with preterm infants in the NICU. So changes in infants' attention, emotional reactions, and motor responses to musical stimuli played over loudspeakers is how they have researched what music infants prefer and the fact that infants do prefer music. 4-month-olds prefer melodies that adults find pleasant sounding with consonant intervals and regular rhythms. 6-month-olds recognize melodies they have recently heard, so they're starting to remember things. And music and singing are valuable tools for infants and toddlers. Moving on to touch, infants need touch and physical contact with caregivers to grow and thrive. We talked about this a little bit. It was either last week or a couple weeks ago, where infants who do not have touch physically grow at a slower rate and may even be labeled as failure to thrive because they are not getting the touch that they need to thrive. Across many cultures, caregivers use massage techniques to connect with and relax infants through the sense of touch. Reflexes, most neonatal reflexes are activated through the sense of touch. Some reflexes disappear within a few months, while others remain throughout life, like our kneecap reflex. And then pain, so skin-to-skin contact, swaddling, kangaroo care, and gentle massage comfort newborns through the sense of touch. Responses to pain change as the infant's cognitive abilities increase and enable them to recognize and anticipate previously encountered sources of discomfort. Taste. Infants do have an innate preference. They have the ability to differentiate between sweet, salty, sour, and bitter tastes. If you are a parent and you have frozen breast milk versus fresh breast milk, or even just breast milk versus formula, they do have different tastes. And you might find that your infant has a preference for fresh breast milk or for formula or for frozen breast milk, and that is due to taste. Infants do have a preference for high energy, sweet tasting substances. The brain needs sugar to grow, needs sugar to do its thing. So that is why, especially children, really like sweets. It is actually in their biology to need it. And they dislike sour and bitter flavors. So foods that pregnant women consume influence newborns' reaction to flavors and odors during the early postnatal period. And cognitive factors and emotional associations play an increasingly important role in children's taste preferences. So the food you eat during pregnancy may actually affect what the child likes, at least those first couple of months to a year. And smell. Infants have a preference for sweet smells that adults find pleasant, such as lavender and vanilla. They dislike odors that adults find unpleasant. Fish, ammonia, sulfur would be another one. So the ability to recognize salient biological odors, such as amniotic fluid and their own mother's breast milk. Infants have this ability to recognize odors, which is if you're taking an infant to daycare or if you are a preschool teacher and work in an infant classroom, it could be a good idea to have the primary caregiver, whether that be mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, foster mom, have a shirt that they wear a lot and bring it to daycare or preschool so that the infant can smell something familiar and it can be a source of comfort. 3-month-olds are able to use a specific odor as a cue for performing previously learned activities, which is interesting. So you can essentially train a baby, say it's nap time or something, and you put on a relaxing smell like eucalyptus or lavender or something like that, uh, their brain then tells them, oh, it's nap time, and they might fall asleep a little bit more quickly if it's incorporated into their routine, if they have a routine. So other senses, intermodal and cross-modal perception. There's a vestibular sense that's present at birth, which conveys information about balance and support and is a trigger for some reflexes. Proprioceptive and kinesthetic senses provide information about the body's position and movement. So this is where the body is situated in space, essentially. And coordination of visual and proprioceptive senses contribute to infants developing awareness of a coherent and enduring physical self. So you can read the slide on your own time. Since we're going at 20 minutes, I'm going to go over to motor development. So motor development, there's a predictable order for major motor milestones. Perception action system aid infants' adaptations to the environment. And here's an example of research methods: looking, reaching, locomoting, in ways to assess motor development. And you can click the link here. Fine motor skills are known as those tiny movements, normally in the fingers and in the jaw, so chewing in the mouth and stuff. Most fine motor skills are reaching, grasping, using utensils, writing, painting, just those tiny finger movements, beating, all of that. And this develops rapidly over the first 6 months of life. Gross motor skills are big body movement. So those are your arms, legs, and torso. This includes sitting, crawling, walking, jumping, running. Infants develop a variety of crawling, cruising, and walking postures. Visual information then guides infants' locomotion. So what they see guides where they go. And locomotor experience helps infants learn about their own physical capabilities. So motor development across cultures. Cross-cultural variation exists in how pre-walking infants are handled and the role parents play in encouraging locomotor development. There are specific cultures that hold their babies and don't allow them to crawl. And when they are ready to walk, they just start walking. We have an interesting study to look at in our additional readings for this week that is kind of similar to this. Infants who are assisted in specific locomotor skills may benefit from that practice, but structured exercise programs are not necessary. So in summary, we have gone over theories. We've gone over specifically vision, hearing, touch, taste, smell. We've also looked in other senses and motor development. I'm sorry this is rushed and that this is quite long. I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of their week. And I will see everybody next week. Please let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or just want to chat.